We'll be continuing our course about the Bhavachakra, which is a central symbol in all Asian philosophy, specifically in Buddhism. The Bhavachakra course that we've been given over the last few months has covered the basic meanings and structures of this ancient symbol. And today we're going to continue talking about the three factors which are at the base of all religions and all mystical traditions. Three factors that are symbolized in many different ways. And in the Buddhist tradition, the symbol of the Bhavachakra, which is usually incorrectly referred to as the Wheel of Samsara, has at the root of its name, bhava, which comes from the root Sanskrit syllable bu, which means to become. Chakra, of course, means wheel. So the Bhavachakra is the wheel of becoming. And as we've explained in the previous lectures, it is a wheel that symbolizes cycles in all nature, and how matter and energy function in nature. This is neither good nor bad. It is simply the coming and going of all things. It is how nature works. So those who look at this wheel of samsara, or wheel of suffering as it's often referred to, are only understanding it in a very superficial way. The reality is that this Bhavachakra implies a profound understanding of how to reach liberation. When we long for liberation from suffering, when we long for spiritual enlightenment, self-realization, awakening, we are longing to become, to experience bhava, of something new. So bhava itself means attitude, status of being. It can mean a subjective becoming, and it can mean a state of mind. So all of us now have a bhava. It is our current state. And in the Gnostic tradition, we call that level of being. Everyone has their own level of being. Our level of being is not defined by our intentions, or by what we believe in, or how we dress, or how much money we have, or who we know or don't know. Our level of being is determined precisely by the conditioning of our consciousness. And that is reflected in our behavior. Not only our physical behavior, but the quality of our heart and the quality of our mind. Our own inner bhava is our level of being. And that's what this wheel symbolizes first and foremost. Our own state of mind. Our state of mind, our state of being, is our level. Our level of cognizance, we could say, or our level of consciousness, relative to nature and relative to divinity. And that is defined, again, by our behavior, by the state of our thinking, the state of our feeling. What is spontaneously occurring inside of us psychologically from moment to moment? That is a reflection of our level of being. We explain it in that way because in this day and age, there are many people who believe themselves to be good people, spiritual, many who even claim to be awakened or enlightened, very serious about their spirituality, and yet their minds rage with envy, with anger, with pride, with lust. So no matter what claims we make about ourselves and what we believe about ourselves, that is irrelevant. The truth of our level of being is in our psyche. It's what emerges in us spontaneously. That is our level of being. And if we're sincere with ourselves, truly honest with ourselves, we will see, looking in our minds, we are not Buddhas. We are not masters. We are not angels. We are deeply afflicted with pride, with envy, with fear, uncertainty, anxiety, doubt, criticism, jealousy, but most especially lust. Deeply afflicted by these poisons. Those poisons, being present in our mind stream, revealed the truth about our level of being. We are very low. A Buddha, an angel, a master does not have those qualities. A fully developed angel or master or Buddha, whatever you want to call them, does not have lust, does not have anger, does not have pride or envy or jealousy or fear or uncertainty or doubt. This is the measure that we need to apply to ourselves in order to understand truthfully, sincerely, honestly, where we stand in relation with divinity and nature. Without that type of sincerity, we will never be able to change positively for our benefit and the benefit of others. So that's why this tool is so critically important. In the center of the wheel are three animals, which symbolize three forces that work in nature and in our psyche. They represent ignorance, craving, and aversion. Three dynamic forces that create. That union of three things puts energy in motion, and that's how the wheel turns in our psyche because of these factors that are moving inside of us constantly. So we've explained the three factors in many lectures and books, and they are birth, death, and sacrifice. The previous lecture we described sacrifice in detail. What sacrifice really means and what it does not mean. Today's lecture, we're going to talk about birth. We're saving death for the last because nobody likes to talk about that. So we're saving that. Really, it's the best part. So I'm saving death for the last. So today we're going to talk about spiritual birth and what that means. To begin that subject, we need to understand something about birth. Birth is not a concept. To have a birth on any level of nature does not happen just because of an intention or because of an idea or because of a wish. Birth is a function in nature, and it happens because of laws, because of how nature works. Spiritual birth is no exception. To be born spiritually doesn't happen because you read a book. It doesn't happen because you found a religion or because a teacher taught you something. Every great master taught very clearly that spiritual birth is an exact process, and there are levels. But that process has been protected. It's been hidden because humanity has been too immature to use it wisely. So in today's lecture, we're going to talk about that hidden teaching because the time has come for humanity to learn it. It is not easy to hear. It is painful because it contradicts much of what we would like to believe. It contradicts many comforting beliefs and traditions that we've held for hundreds, even thousands of years. Because our ideas at our level of being do not correspond to the higher levels of being. To reach a higher level of being, we have to stop being what we are. To become something new, we have to change. And that change begins inside of us. psychologically, spiritually, even physically. As I explained in the previous lecture, these three factors are completely intertwined as one. You cannot separate them. We separate them in lectures as a matter of convenience, because we're all beginners and it's hard for us to really assimilate this type of knowledge because it's very deep knowledge. But the reality is, you cannot separate death, birth, and sacrifice and achieve anything. Remember, three forces united create change. If you have two forces, nothing will result. Or one force, nothing will result. It takes three to create. And that's why at the base of every religion we find a trinity of divine forces. Always. Three forces. And it's true psychologically and spiritually here and now. These three forces are a way of harnessing and directing energy in ourselves, psychologically, spiritually, even physically. To sacrifice is to give up personal will, self-will, desire, craving for the better good. To give up something to serve others, to serve the betterment of oneself and others. And in the process of sacrificing something of value to us, there is a death. The attachment can die. The craving can die. An element in us psychologically can die, like attachment, like lust or pride. Envy can die. Fear can die. And in the process of giving up something of value to us, in order to reach something higher, to perform an act of love or charity, an act of sacrifice, that element dies, and then something new is born, something higher. That's how these three are intertwined. They are one. So in the very beginning levels of every religion, this is learned as ethics. It's the foundation of every true mystical tradition. Ethics. How to do what is good for oneself and others, and how to stop doing what's harmful to oneself and others. So those beginning stages are: don't take intoxicants, don't steal, don't kill, don't lie, don't misuse sexual energy. Those are the 5 basic vows that every beginner in Buddhism takes. And we find those 5 reflected in every tradition in the world. In the yogic traditions, they are hidden in yama and niyama, which are the beginning levels of Patanjali's yogas. They are also hidden in the 10 Commandments, just phrased differently. Different words, same meaning. So when you learn those types of ethics, you sacrifice your desire or the sensation of being drunk so that you don't become afflicted with that addiction. And then you're better able to perform your responsibilities as a parent, as a husband, a wife, a son, a daughter. Because the drunkard, the alcoholic, cannot be relied upon and only brings strife and pain to a family, to a workplace. Simple. It's a sacrifice. The death of the addiction gives birth to a person who has more responsibility to themselves and to others. Simple. 3 factors in one act. And we find that's true of every ethic. When you do not lie, you sacrifice sometimes your own image. When you make a mistake and someone catches you, you want to lie out of pride, right, to protect your image. But when you tell the truth, you sacrifice your pride. Isn't it true? And that pride is dying. It's painful because then the pride is humiliated. Yeah, I made a mistake. I did something I shouldn't have done. But then born from that is something true. It's called ethics. It's called integrity, honesty. This is true of every ethic. Now, specifically, we find in all the ancient religions the teaching about restraining sexual energy, about dealing with it in a very delicate and respectful way. Nowadays, nobody does this. This part of religion has been set aside because we love lustful animal sexuality too much. So we don't want to deal with that part. But if you study religion, you know that the beginners in all religions always had to enter into some form of chastity or preservation of sexual energy as they work towards the higher mysteries. In the Buddhist and Hindu traditions became established, the yogic traditions, also the traditions of monks and nuns, who would isolate themselves from the opposite sex in order to work in time without the temptation of sexuality, so they could learn to manage that energy on their own. And then gradually, once they achieved control of that force and had achieved the awakening of their consciousness, that is, they were awake, not asleep like us, but with a mind that was stable, bright, and clear. And when they meditate, they had clairvoyance. They could investigate things in the internal worlds, both in the body and out of the body. Not like us in spiritual darkness, awake. Then those souls would be given the higher mysteries and taught how to engage in sexual activity in order to reach the next level. So in those two stages, we see sacrifice, death, and birth. The single person sacrifices their sexual engagement with others, the experience of sexuality with others. And there's a sort of death in that. Lust suffers a lot, which is a good thing. Because in the suffering of that lust and the denial of that lust can be cleansed and purified. And from that emerges chastity, which is love, true love. So monks and nuns were in preparation to learn to really love, not lust, not be victims of animal sex. So that by the time they were prepared to enter a marriage, they could then meet their partner with love, not lust, but truly love them. So we see there sacrifice, death, and birth. And then upon entering into the marriage, the couple had to maintain their vows and yet be married. And this is a mystery that's hidden in the writings of Paul, who says exactly that. To be married, but to be as though you were not. And what he's stating in those Gospels, in his writings, is precisely this. To be married, to be in love, to engage in the sexual act, but to continue to restrain the energy. To not indulge in animal lust. In other words, to continue to avoid the orgasm. To retain those forces. In that act, there is a sacrifice. The energy is restrained. The lust suffers. It dies. And from that death, love, chastity, beauty emerges. This is the secret teaching hidden in every religion. It is the nature of Tantra or alchemy, the upright aspect. There's obviously a negative aspect also, but we don't teach that here. So, to enter those mysteries, we begin where we are now. We need to understand our own level of being and understand how we're working with these energies in ourselves. Our sexual energy, our emotional energy, our mental energy. What are we becoming? Because in each moment, we are transforming energy. The energy forces are flowing through us constantly. Everything we eat and drink and breathe is a transformation of energy. So that wheel of becoming is ourselves. And what we are becoming is propelled by our behavior. Spiritually, psychologically, sexually. Every action we perform, physically, emotionally, mentally, creates. So if in our moment-to-moment existence, we are nourishing and protecting our anger, we are becoming that. It defines our level of being. We irradiate anger, not beauty. And if in our three brains we are nourishing and protecting, feeding lust, that is our level of being. And we radiate lust. And we affect others with our lust. And the lust of others affects us. And that is our level. That is not an angel. That is a devil. So let's be honest. Let's be honest and direct about where we are, where we stand, so that we can change. One of the greatest lessons of the Bhavachakra is that we can change. The wheel is constantly moving. Every action we perform propels our trajectory through space-time. And if we change for the better, we raise our level of being. It is not easy, but it can be done. So this is the beginning of any sincere, genuine, spiritual, religious, or mystical tradition is right here. Ethics, from moment to moment. Learning to observe yourself, learning to see how you behave physically, emotionally, mentally, and what comes of it. In other words, to not look for blame outside. To not seek and point at the sources of suffering outside of ourselves, but to realize we are creating our suffering. It is our own level of being that produces it. If we are an angry type of person, if we are a proud type of person, we are putting ourselves in that circumstance for the pride to be fed and stimulated and nourished, and that is what's making us suffer. And that is what's making others suffer. We create it. The very first line of probably the most important teaching of the Buddha Shakyamuni states, our mind, we create, I'm trying to remember exactly how the quote is translated. Our lives are what we think, basically is what it states. We become according to our way of thinking, is what it says. We are what we are now because of how we have been thinking and behaving previously. So if our life is characterized by suffering of different types, it is because of our own behavior that we are in our situation. So if we want to change it, we have to change our behavior. And naturally, the external aspect will change as well. So our goal, obviously, is to escape suffering. The way we are now, we are really trapped in painful, repetitive cycles. This is one of the most surprising things to many students to learn in the beginning. Something that you don't necessarily learn intellectually, but that as you start to truly practice self-observation, self-remembering, and meditation, you start to realize that your day-to-day life is incredibly repetitive. Not only incredibly repetitive, but you're repeating the same types of suffering again and again and again. And it's shocking, and it's disturbing to see that. And that is a characteristic of being asleep psychologically, spiritually, which we are. We are not awake. I know everyone here thinks that they're awake. But we're not talking about the sleep of the physical body. We're talking about the sleep of the consciousness. Our state of consciousness right now is extremely low. It is characterized by an utter lack of direction. Our consciousness is very hazy and dim, and it's constantly distracted. You may notice through the course of this lecture that you only pick up a sentence or two of what I say before you're distracted and off thinking about something else. Maybe I remind you of something, and you start remembering, oh yeah, I remember when this happened and that happened, and then 5 minutes go by, and then you realize that I'm still talking and you don't know what I'm talking about. That's because the consciousness is asleep. That's why. It's funny, but it's sad. We are asleep. Someone with an awakened consciousness does not have that experience. Someone who is awake is here and now, is not distracted, perceives everything, not only outside, but most importantly, inside. Someone who is awake, a beginner who is awakening, does not forget themselves. They remember that they're in the body. They know consciously they are in the physical world. And also, someone who is awakened at the beginning level knows when they are out of the body. When their physical body is asleep, they know that the physical body is asleep, and they know they are in the astral world. They do not dream. They are awake. So if you want to know if you're awake or asleep, observe what happens to you through the day and the night. If you lose cognizance of yourself for an instant, you are asleep. This is how rigorous it is to be awake. To be awake is to be Buddha. That's the meaning of the word, Buddha. Awakened. It is to have the consciousness fully activated, present, here and now. No haziness, no dreaminess, no daydreaming, no distractions, no self-forgetting. Bright, clear, luminous, perceptive, present, here and now, never stopping. And it irradiates a quality of serenity and penetrating insight. You see, the term Buddha in Sanskrit means awakened one, enlightened, sage, knowledge, but used as an adjective in Sanskrit, it can mean intelligent, conscious, awake, wise. Every person in every religion wants that. They use other names. The Christians want to be angels. Many think they already are, even though Jesus never said that. Every religion has their own names for this state or level of being, this bhava. The term Buddha is a very useful term to define this because it's non-physical. The term Buddha does not refer to a body, a person. It's a state of being. So everybody nowadays in this planet thinks Buddha was one man, just as everybody thinks Christ was one man. But these terms are not names. They are titles. They are descriptions. They are adjectives. Christ is a term for a force in nature. Buddha is a term for a level of being, a level of bhava, a state of existence. I'm emphasizing this because we need to clearly see what we are not in order to understand what we must become. To become that, we have to not be what we are now, which means that what we are now has to die, which is uncomfortable. what we are now, our name, our resentments, our attachments, our ambitions, all have to die. This includes spiritual ambition. It states in a sacred scripture, all ambition is punished by the law of nemesis, karma. This includes spiritual ambition, because spiritual ambition is rooted in pride. Our longing for divinity should not be based in pride, envy, jealousy, fear. It should be rooted in the heart because of love. So, in order to become a Buddha, we have to be born. A Buddha does not come out of nothing. A Buddha is also born, like any other thing in nature. Any living creature in nature is born. A Buddha, an angel, is no exception. And let's observe how things are born in nature. Every insect, every animal, every human being, every living conscious entity, even plants, are born from sex, without any exception. Buddhas, angels, and gods are also born from sex, but not from animal sex. Animal sexuality creates animals. That's it. To create an angel, a master, a Buddha, you need sexuality that corresponds to that level of being. Not animal sexuality. Those who engage in sexuality as an animal will have their level of being as an animal. And every result of that act will be animal. Without any exception. That's how nature works. To create a Buddha, your sexuality has to be at that level. Aspiring to that. Purifying. Clean. No lust. This is a tall order. That's why there are not that many Buddhas here. Few are willing to do it. Few are willing to sacrifice their lust for the lust to die so the Buddha can be born. It can happen because inside of us we have the embryo of a Buddha. In Sanskrit, this is called Tathagata Garbha. This word, Tathagata, is very difficult to translate because the components of the word, like Hebrew, Sanskrit is multi-layered. So, thus gone one is one way to translate it. Or thus coming one. Or thus perfected one. Those are all accurate. And Tathagata, or Tathagata, is a name of the Buddha. If you read any Buddhist scriptures, the Buddha refers to himself as Tathagata. So he's referring to himself with this word that's really hard to translate. The word refers to the beyond. Tatha, or tatha, refers to the absolute. It means suchness, thatness, the intrinsic essence of everything. The Ein Sof, in other words. It is the shunyata, the foundational potentiality of all things. The emptiness. A fully developed Buddha is one who has fully understood, comprehended, and merged with that. We call them Paramartha Satyas. Those who have gone beyond to the absolute happiness. So, Tatha refers to that suchness, and Gata, or Gata, can mean coming or going. So this term Tathagata, and some people say it Tathagata in English, can mean that the one who has gone to thusness, or the one who is coming from thusness, or the one who is perfected, who has become the absolute. So an alternate rendering of this Tathagata can be beyond coming and going. In other words, someone who has gotten off the wheel, the repetitive wheel, the Bhavachakra. And the second part of Tathagata, Garbha, is Garbha, which means embryo, womb. So you see, this term translated means the embryo or the potential to be one who goes beyond. The potential to be beyond coming and going. So this being all so difficult to translate and difficult to teach and understand, in the Asian traditions, they simplified this and started calling it Buddha Dhatu, which means the same thing. And so now in English, they call it Buddha nature. So anybody who studied Buddhism has heard about the Buddha nature. And they say everybody's got the Buddha nature. So now everybody thinks, oh, well, everybody's got the Buddha nature, that means I'm a Buddha. This shows you how quickly degenerated the teachings become because of our lazy brains, because of our pride. Buddha nature does not mean we're a Buddha. It means that we have inside of us the seed. The seed of an apple tree cannot give you a fruit until the seed dies. And out of that breaking of the seed, the tree comes. And the tree grows for a long time in a very delicate and precise way. And it's very vulnerable. Out of all the apples that come out of the tree, out of the millions of seeds, how many trees are born? And how many of those trees are destroyed by the wind, by animals, by human beings? Until finally some tree produces fruit again. We are like that. We are seeds. And from us can come a Buddha. But only if the circumstances, the conditions are correct, and if the correct forces are applied to nourish and protect that seed, so that at the right moment the seed can die, new birth can occur, and that Buddha can emerge and grow. We are exactly subject to those laws, but unfortunately humanity does not know them. Rather, has ignored them, because all the religions have the rules, but we ignore them, because they contradict our desires. We prefer to nourish our desires than to nourish our inner Buddha, our inner angel. Interestingly, the term Garbha also means fire. It also means child, conception. This is a really important point, especially if you've studied alchemy and you've studied the golden child. This is an important symbol in the Western tradition of alchemy, but here this is hidden in Asia, which was very divided, very separated from the West at the time these traditions were propagated. But that they have the exact same symbols. So, fire, embryo, all of these meanings apply. So remember that as we go through the lecture. Fire, embryo, Buddha nature. We need to know how to grow this seed. The problem is, we are so blinded by our psyche that we don't understand how to do it. We reject the teachings of our traditional religions, so now everybody's seeking alternative religions. And because we are so hypnotized by our own desires, we only seek religions that agree with our desires, that will feed our fear and our lust. So that's why humanity is flocking towards those new religions or new ideas or new concepts that make us feel better about being degenerated. They give us an insurance policy to heaven. They say, if you just say these words and give us some money, you're going to go to heaven. And humanity loves that. But it's all lies. Nature doesn't work that way. God does not work that way. Divinity does not want our money. Divinity wants for us to merge with it, which means we have to become like it. Jesus said, "Be ye perfect, as your Father in heaven is perfect." Who amongst the Christians is striving for perfection? They are not. They say, I believe in Jesus, so I'm freed. And they keep all their lust and their anger and their pride, and they think they're going to go to heaven with that, even though Jesus said, no murderer, no thief, no idolater, no fornicator will go to heaven. And all of them are worshiping the idols of their pride and lust and envy. And all of them are lying. And all of them are killing each other and other people with their language, their words, their speech, their everything. We all do it. What we need to comprehend is that we need to change. And in that process of change, we need help. And the help is there. It's available. It can be had. Firstly, in order to acquire spiritual birth, you need the will to do it. If someone does not have the will to do it, it will never happen. Secondly, we need the instructions. If someone has the will, but no instructions, they will go nowhere. And history is filled with examples of people like that. Particularly in the Asian traditions and the alchemical traditions as well, we hear stories of people who burned, crying, and suffering, wanting the knowledge in order to be born again. Who did everything they could, went to every teacher, traveled all over the world, suffered enormous hardships, trying to find the secret, and yet failing. Because of karma. And now, in these moments, the teachings are freely available, and yet few want it. It's very ironic. So now, if you have access to the teachings, you really just need the will to do it. The third thing you need are the circumstances. Anyone who's attending a class or hearing a lecture probably has the circumstances to do it. Meaning, you aren't brain dead. You've not been shot through the head and in a vegetable state in a hospital. You are physically active to some degree. You have some capacity to listen, to read, to understand. You can breathe. You can eat. Your heart functions. You have some cognizance. From that, you can change. If you have the knowledge and the will to do it, you can change. According to your circumstances, according to your level, according to your will. Now, from that point, there are going to be many differences. And what's going to make the most significant impact there, amongst all of those factors, is not the circumstances. Many people complain, my circumstances are holding me back. My wife's making my life hell. It isn't your wife. It isn't your husband. Or some people say, my teacher's no good. He didn't teach me how to meditate. Or my teacher didn't teach me this or teach me that. Those are excuses. The knowledge is available. Now especially. 10 years ago, 20 years ago, it was more difficult, especially in English. Now there's no excuse. The teachings are freely available. What is the last factor there? Willpower. The reason most people don't achieve anything, they don't advance, is simply a question of will. The main aid and support that we need to achieve it, beyond that, if we have the circumstances, we have the teaching, we have the will, once we start working, we're studying the teaching, we're practicing the teaching, the support that we get, the help that we get, isn't from a physical school, although that's useful. It isn't from a teacher, although that's useful. It isn't from spiritual friends, although that's useful. It isn't from having a husband or wife, although that's useful. The main help is from your inner divinity, which, by the way, we all forget. None of us remember our Divine Mother. This is a characteristic of being asleep. None of us remember our inner Buddha, our inner Father, from moment to moment. This is a characteristic of being asleep. Someone who is awakened never forgets God. Not for an instant. A person who is awake is in continual remembrance of their divinity. Not themselves, but their inner source, their inner light. In the beginning of the work, it's most significant for the aspirant, the devotee, to remember their inner Divine Mother. On a merely logical level, you can see why. When you're a child, in many cases, it is the mother who's more sympathetic. It is the mother more directly responsible for feeding the child, cleaning the child, protecting the child, taking care of the child from moment to moment. The father, generally, is the one who's out working, hunting, providing for the family, protecting the family. The mother's the one doing the moment-to-moment dirty work with the baby. Spiritually, this is also true. Our inner Divine Mother is our guide, our protector. Unfortunately, in the West, this aspect of spirituality has been severed, hugely impacted by politics and dogma for 1,000 years. In the East, it's not been forgotten. So in Sanskrit, there are thousands of names for the Divine Mother. One of the most important ones is Maya. This name Maya is extremely deep. The implications of those two letters extend throughout the entirety of Hinduism and Buddhism. Every aspect, every level. You can give levels and levels and levels of lectures about the term Maya, from the beginning level to the Mahayana to the Tantrayana, all the levels of teaching. Importantly, in the pre-Vedic times, we're talking 4,000 to 5,000 years ago, this term meant art, wisdom, extraordinary or supernatural power. It referred to a type of creative power that is far beyond a human level. It's a name of God as female, feminine. Maya is goddess. Somehow, around the time of the Vedas emerging, which is hard to date specifically, but somewhere around 4,000 years ago, the term gradually changed and adopted a new aspect in terms of the written literature. And the new aspect is what people talk about now. That Maya means illusion, unreality, deception, trick, sorcery, witchcraft, etc. So here we find in this term Maya a duality. Something positive, something negative. What's important to grasp here is that Maya is one thing. Maya is the goddess. Maya is nature itself. What's really critical, though, to grasp, though, is when we think of nature, we think of plants and trees and birds and bees and all the physical things. That's not what we're talking about in Gnosis when we talk about nature. When we talk about nature, we're talking about 7 dimensions of nature, not just the physical one. The physical one is the most gross, the most dense. It's also the least important, the most superficial. Nature, as Divine Mother, is Prakriti. It's the root energy, the first emergence out of the womb of nature. It's where the primordial potentiality of all things, the absolute, the Ein Sof, becomes something. So that first bhava happens. The wheel turns for the first time. The Bhavachakra is in motion. So the 3 forces, the Trinity, merge as 2 and create. That 2 is Father, Mother, Shiva, Shakti, Ab, Ima. That is the God and Goddess of all things, the El and Eloah. And in their union, they are Elohim. The Elohim, which is God, Goddess, created. In other words, Bhava, becoming. That's all hidden in Genesis, the first 2 chapters. It's all hidden in the Tantric scriptures. It's hidden in every religion. So that first emergence is the ocean of life. And that ocean of life gets many names. In Hinduism, it's Maya. In the Bible, it's Shamayim, which also can be called Shekinah. Shekinah is the light or radiance of the Divine Mother. But that light, that radiance, is the fire, the shin in Shamayim. Shamayim is translated as heavens in the Bible, but it literally means fire water. Now, I want to point out an important correlation here. Maya, extraordinary or supernatural power, the goddess, the Divine Mother, is that ocean, the mem, the letter mem of Mayim. That first water that emerges, the mem. Maya starts with a letter M also, ma, mem. That ma of Sanskrit also means water, like the mem in Hebrew. Same thing. And from that comes fire. Tathagatagarbha, the child, the embryo of the Buddha, the Shin. It's all hidden there. So this Maya, the Divine Mother, is the wheel itself. She is the body of nature. Everyone, when they hear about the Divine Mother, thinks of a woman in a physical body who lives in some cloud-filled place very far away from here. That is not the Divine Mother. That is an idea that people have in their heads because they went to Sunday school too much. I read too many comic books. The Divine Mother is nature. The Divine Mother has no form. The Divine Mother is the very fabric of existence. Contemplate that. Everything that you are, not just physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, is her fabric. If you really meditate on that, really contemplate that, you will be ashamed with yourself to realize that you dress yourself with this body that she gave you, and you take it out on the street, and you yell, and you get angry, and you blame people, you criticize, you gossip, you lie, you steal, you fornicate, you commit all the crimes that you know you're not supposed to commit with her body, with her matter, with her energy. The Divine Mother the creator of everything. It's an astonishing thing to meditate on. Really. Now you can sort of see why we have this duality in the name. If the Divine Mother is the fabric of everything, she is also the fabric of hell. She is also the fundamental ground of our lust and anger and pride. Isn't it? That's why in Hinduism we find the Divine Mother is dual. She is Durga, Parvati, Sarasvati, Lakshmi. She is also Kali, the Black One, Proserpine, Hecate, the goddess of hell, the one who takes her children by the hand into the abyss to suffer. She does it out of love, to purify her children, because they don't want to purify themselves. Many worship that aspect of the Divine Mother. They perform sacrifices to her. They think that by appeasing her through committing crimes, they will gain benefit. They're mistaken. She doesn't work that way. She is the same mother, but working in harmony with her own laws. In other words, as we produce actions through ourselves, we create our reality. As we indulge in our pride and our anger and our lust, and we continually think in those ways, we see the world through our anger, through our pride, through our envy. The one who suffers from envy feels that they deserve what others have. And when they perceive the world, they always look at it in that way. Oh, she has what I want. Oh, he has what I want. So that person is not seeing reality. They are seeing through the filter of their desire. So they are a victim of Maya, illusion. They are transforming energy and interacting with nature at that level. So for them, the body of the Divine Mother is illusion. Or rather, I should say, for us. Because we are all victims of that. But that is not her fault. She is not doing that to us, to punish us. We are doing it to ourselves. And this is a grave misunderstanding of people who study Hinduism and Buddhism, and they study Maya, and they think the Divine Mother is evil, is cruel, is doing this to mock us. And that's not true. We are mocking ourselves. We are hurting the Divine Mother with our behavior. So she can help us because she is also the mother of the Buddha. This points out something really interesting. When you study this type of philosophy, you see this terrible situation of suffering that all of us are trapped in, symbolized in many myths. And we always see how the heroes have to descend into the abyss in order to rise up as heroes. And that's our situation. We are trapped in illusion, deception, self-created. But it's precisely in that we can acquire the knowledge in order to emerge out, greater than before, like a phoenix rising up out of the darkness. So in the Buddhist tradition, all of this is symbolized in a very interesting way. In Buddhism, it is explained that the story of the life of the Buddha has many stages. The most common interpretation or presentation of the story is with 12 fundamental steps or stages in the life of the Buddha. I'm not going to talk about all of them because that would take a long time. But I want to point out two critical stages, the first and third. Or no, it's not the first, it's the second and third, I believe. This image shows a queen resting at night. I know in this particular painting she's got her head upright, but she's supposed to be asleep. And she's having a dream. And in the dream, a white elephant comes from heaven and enters into her side, into her womb. So this dream is a symbol of how the Buddha descends into the womb of his mother in order for him to be born. Now, there are some interesting details in the story. Firstly, she's a queen. Secondly, she is in the time of her monthly purification retreat, which means she's on her menstrual cycle. And in Hindu tradition, when the wife is having her cycle, she lives apart from the husband. In other words, they don't have sexual relations for those days out of respect, because the menstrual cycle, the woman is cleansing impurities out of the body. So it was during this time that she had this dream and became pregnant. This story represents how the Father, who is above, represented by the elephant, merges into the Divine Mother in order to extend itself into the world, to enter into manifestation. The elephant here represents our innermost, our inner Buddha, our Atman, or as the Gospels say, our Father who is in heaven. The elephant represents the power of the Holy Spirit who creates through this union of God and Goddess. And it is a union of chastity. No fornication, no orgasm. And that's symbolized by her being on her menstrual cycle and being separated from her husband. This is an immaculate conception. Immaculate means perfectly clean. No spilling. As it says in Leviticus, anyone who spills his semen shall be unclean. So this is an immaculate conception, like the birth or the impregnation of Mary when Jesus was to be born. The Holy Spirit descended as a dove, a white dove. This is a white elephant. Same symbol. So her name is Maya. We find two different variations of the name in Buddhism, Mahamaya and Maya Devi. They mean the same thing. Maha means great. Devi means goddess. So great Maya or Maya goddess. So she becomes pregnant. Now many, of course, Buddhists, like the Christians, they interpret these scriptures literally and think there was literally a woman named Mahamaya who was literally a queen who literally gave birth to the Buddha, and the Buddha was born purely and totally awakened. They don't understand that these are symbols, just like the tradition of Jesus. There are truthful elements. Yeah, the Buddha as a man had a mother, but not all of this is directly literal to the actual physical circumstances. We're interested in the meanings. The reason the story was given to us is so that we can learn from it and apply it to our own spiritual birth. So the next phase of the story, after she's been pregnant for 10 lunar months, she decides to go into the garden. Everybody know about the Garden of Eden, right? In the Bible? Right, but this story isn't from the Bible. This story is from India, and it's older than the Bible. So Mahamaya goes into the garden, pregnant, and suddenly she feels that the child is going to be born. So she reaches up and grabs a hold of the branch of a tree, It's a plaksha tree. A plaksha is a ficus tree. And as she grabs this branch and steadies herself, suddenly the child spontaneously bursts from her, out of her side, the same way he entered, and emerged like a ray of light, like a sun. And when that happened, all the gods were astonished because they all saw what happened. And they all came to observe this birth. And Indra, who's the god equivalent to Jupiter, came to observe. And at that moment, the child, the golden child, the Buddha, took 7 steps. And with each step, a lotus emerged. And at that 7th step, he pointed to the sky and said, I am the greatest in this world. Now, the Buddhists, of course, think this is all literal and that it actually happened this way. The real meaning, though, is far more important and deeper. This is not a literal story. It's a symbolic story that represents levels and stages of spiritual development that we ourselves need to attain. The Buddha here represents our inner Buddha. The 7 steps represent stages of spiritual birth. The Buddha in us is born through a series of 7 steps. And upon reaching the 7th, he then can point back to the absolute and say, I am. Just the same way Jesus taught, I am. That I am is not the personality. It is not the me, myself, the I. It is the innermost. It is the Christ, the absolute, the real being. So this story represents that. It is not about you and me becoming a Buddha. It is about our innermost becoming a Buddha. This story shows how it happens. Now we're going to talk about more specifically how we help to achieve it. I mentioned that tree that the Divine Mother grabbed was a fig tree. Did you also know that the tree that the Buddha meditates under is a fig tree? The Bodhi tree? It's also a fig tree. And did you know that the tree in the Garden of Eden that Adam and Eve ate of is also a fig tree? Isn't that interesting? That Adam and Eve and the birth of the Buddha all happened in a garden with a fig tree. Think it was an accident? That these stories are so similar? I don't think so. The fig tree is a deep symbol related to feminine sexual forces that flow in all of nature, related to the Divine Mother. And we have those forces in us. They are related to Ida, to Hava, to Eve. And as you know in the story of Adam and Eve eats the fruit, which causes Adam and Eve to be cast out of the garden. That's why we are all in the wilderness suffering. In order to return to Eden, we have to restore the fallen serpent of Ida, the feminine sexual forces in us that are wrapped around our spinal column. That's here. That's how the Buddha becomes born in us, by learning to work with our sexual energy. Now in the Bible, it says that the Elohim put in the garden the tree of life also in the midst of the garden, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Christians, of course, and Jews think those trees were actual physical trees. However many thousands of years ago they think it literally happened. And they don't understand that those trees are symbolic trees, not physical trees. The tree of life represents our being, our bhava. The tree of life and the Bhavachakra are the same thing, just shown in a different way. The tree of life we represent in the tradition of Kabbalah as this structure of 10 spheres, arranged as 3 triangles with 1 sphere below. That's the tree of life. It represents the levels of being, both in nature and in ourselves. It's organized by dimensions. The lowest dimensions are at the bottom, the most refined at the top. The tree of knowledge shares its roots with the tree of life. The tree of knowledge is gnosis, da'at, which is here. It's a mysterious sphere, hidden, secret, protected. That's why the angel protects the way in the Bible with a flaming sword. That's why Jehovah Elohim said, "Thou shalt not eat of it." Because to take anything from this tree implies a great responsibility. To work with the tree of knowledge, you need to know what you're doing. You see, the name of it is the tree of knowledge of good and evil. That's how it's translated in English in the popular Bibles. But the Hebrew words don't say good and evil. The Hebrew words are tov ve'ra. Tov is goodness. Goodness is a term that refers to our innermost. Chesed, mercy, goodness. Ra means impurity, pollution. And in the Bible, it says that pollution is the orgasm. So we see here the tree of the gnosis of chastity and fornication. Two forms of sexuality, animal and divine. The symbol of Adam and Eve eating from the fruit is a symbol of humanity learning the orgasm and becoming addicted to it. And because of that addiction to that sensation, humanity lost their powers of being able to see God, talk to God, directly relate to God, and was cast out of Eden by their own actions. Adam and Eve left because of their behavior. They cast themselves out. And we are the consequence. People who have no direct knowledge of God. We have a lot of beliefs and a lot of theories, but we are asleep. To return to Eden, to acquire direct knowledge of God, means we have to rectify the mistake. We have to fix what we broke. We have to abide by the laws of the garden. And the law states, "Thou shalt not eat of it." That means we need to know what the tree is. We need to respect the tree of knowledge, work with the tree of knowledge, but not abuse its fruit, which is sexual energy. We are sexual beings. Sex is part of life. Sex creates life, including spiritual life. By restoring our sexuality to its previous state, we can then elevate ourselves to a higher state. But first we have to fix the mistake that we made. So interestingly, I wanted to point out also that Hebrew, the word for knowledge is da'at, so we refer to this type of knowledge as da'at. But in Sanskrit it's bodhi, but that word bodhi has masculine and feminine terms, bodha and bodhi. Personally, I find that very interesting, that knowledge is both masculine and feminine. Adam and Eve. In other words, you need both. Adam and Eve. So in the story of the Buddha, in a later stage of his development, if you're familiar with his story, the way the symbolic story of the Buddha goes is that he was born to a king and queen. He grew up a very spoiled prince, had access to all of the riches of the world, and indulged in it. Had all the money, all the power, all the women. He was an expert at everything. He was handsome, he was skilled, he was strong. So he had everything that all of us want. Good looks, money, fame, popularity. All the princesses wanted to be with him. He got married, he had children. But it stated that he then saw suffering. His parents tried to prevent him from seeing old age, death, and sickness. But fortunately, by the intervention of some other beings, he saw these things and was so moved with compassion that he eventually decided to renounce all of the indulgences and pleasures of the world, and he became a yogi. He went to the forest. He renounced everything. He had only a robe and a bowl. He begged for his food. He had no money, no nothing, empty. He only meditated for many years. So he became emaciated. He was at the point of death. Now, let me pause in the story for a moment and point out how much willpower that would take. How much will it would take to meditate that intensely, to have that much concern about suffering, because that's what motivated him. When he saw he had all the wealth and the power and the glory, but then he saw people suffering and that death was inevitable, he became overwhelmed and realized, what is the point of having all these material things, of being famous, of being popular, strong and handsome, of sex, of children, of wives? What's the point if we're just going to get sick and die? And then repeat it again. Be born again and do it again and do it again and do it again. Build up all these things we're attached to and then lose them. What's the point? That's what moved him to renounce it. And spent years in the jungle. It's not like going to the park here. We're talking about the jungle. Lions and tigers and bears. And scorpions. And snakes. And yet he did it. Symbolically, of course. Remember, this is symbolic. There are literal elements that happened. But we're talking about the symbolic importance of this. So we see two things here. We see that he had everything, and then he had nothing. Two sides of a pendulum, isn't it? One side is craving. All the things that we want. All right? We want wealth, we want popularity, we want to be handsome or pretty. We want to have all the fame. We want everybody to envy us, to talk about us, to wish they had what we had. So he had all of that, but then he renounced it. Then we have the other side, aversion. He gave away everything, gave up everything, went to the woods, and got to the brink of death because he wasn't eating. He was surviving on a single grain of rice a day. He became a skeleton with skin. That's how intensely he was meditating. All he did all day and all night was meditate. Now, at this moment, he had an epiphany. He suddenly realized this duality that we can see so easily from our perspective here in the classroom. That he had everything, he renounced everything. Two extremes. Two, T-O-O, also. Too extreme. These two extremes were too extreme. One side he had too much, the other side he had too little. And that moment he realized. So in the story, it goes that at that instant, a woman appears with a bowl of rice milk. And she comes to him and feeds it to him, and he eats it. The first food he's had in years. And he's immediately, completely restored back to health. Now remember, he was at the brink of death. And then, when he finishes the bowl of rice milk, he sets it in the river, and it flows upstream against the current. Now, the Buddhists love the story but they have no idea what it means, sadly. Well, some of them do, but they don't say. We're going to explain it today. This story represents how we ourselves enter into spiritual birth. How do I know that? The woman's name is Sujata. Her name means good birth. The Buddha here represents us, our embryo of a Buddha that is experiencing the coming and going of the wheel of becoming. We are experiencing from moment to moment, day to day, lifetime to lifetime, the extremes of karma. In one moment we have everything, and the next it's taken away. And yet we continue to repeat the painful cycle, never comprehending. You see, the Buddha comprehended it. That's what brought the third factor, the third force. He saw one extreme, he saw the other extreme, but then he saw the balance, the middle. He realized, he understood. It is neither having too much or too little. It is to be in the middle. It is to do as Paul advised, to be married as though one is not. So the answer here is that this symbol represents how the initiate, the consciousness, has to work in order to achieve spiritual birth. It is psychological, it is emotional, it is spiritual, it is sexual. The story is representing how it is neither through indulging in sex, the way he did with his palatial lifestyle and having lots of women and wives, neither renouncing sex by having no women, by being celibate. Neither way leads to liberation. Neither one. The way to full liberation is to be in the middle. And that's why at that moment, at the brink of losing his existence, his wife appears. The Divine Mother, in the form of his wife, in the form of his divine soul as well, appears to give him the answer, a bowl of rice milk. Now, I don't want to be crude, but it's obvious that rice milk looks like semen, doesn't it? A milky fluid with life-giving elements in it. The wife and the husband sharing that nourishment for the soul, not wasting it, not indulging in it, but being nourished. Then he takes the bowl and puts it in the river of life, and it goes against the current. It flows up the spinal column to lead him back to the absolute. In other words, this is how the forces of the Divine Mother, the fire in the water, creates the soul. The Shin in the Mayim, the Shamayim. So this is the same essential symbol as what we find in the book of John when Jesus talks to the Samaritan woman and she says, he asks her to draw from the well for him, and she says, how can you ask me to draw water from the well for you? And he says, if you knew who was saying this to you, you would not hesitate, because the water I can give you is the water of everlasting life. And she says, tell me how I can get access to that water. And he says, go call your husband. It's in the book of John. It's the same thing as this. The answer to the life that we need is in the water, and it's found with husband and wife in immaculate sexuality. That's why Buddhism, at the highest mysteries, always has this symbolism. Yab, Yum. Father, Mother. Ab, Ima. Shiva, Shakti. The union of masculine and feminine in chastity, in purity, creates This is divine sexuality, angelic, Buddhic, not animal. There is no lust here. There is no orgasm here. There is transmutation of energy. There is no indulgence in sensation. There is sensation. It happens. But one neither indulges in it on one extreme or avoids it at the other extreme. Instead, one experiences it, transmutes it back to the divine. No animality. This is why the Buddhists, the Christians, the Jews, in the ancient heart of all their traditions, learned to renounce the orgasm, restrain the energy, and transform it. And then later to enter marriage and continue the same thing. A single person harnessing that force awakens consciousness. That's why the original levels of spirituality, the people worked as singles in preparation, and they would awaken. They would develop powers, but as a single person. Preparing themselves, awakening consciousness, becoming prepared. And then when they were prepared, when their teacher knew, firstly, that the student was awake, secondly, that the student could handle it, the student would be introduced to their spouse and married. Marriage is a sacred act. It is a religious function for the soul. That's why it's so shrouded in mysticism and beauty. It's not about money. It's about religion. It always has been, it always will be. The two souls become one. They become Elohim. Male, female, joined. One flesh. That's what it says in the Bible. That one flesh creates as the gods do, if they know how to manage the energy. To restrain it, to purify it, to make it an offering to the divine, to sacrifice lust. Lust is killed, and born from that is beauty, love. So that rice water in Sanskrit is called soma. And soma, if you've ever studied the Vedas, is hugely important in ancient Indian culture, ancient Indian scripture. The word soma means extract, nectar, moon, wind, water, air, ether, rice water, rice gruel, heaven, and sky. I already told you that in the Bible, heaven is Shamayim, which is the fire water, which is the Divine Mother, which is the upper Eden. It is that. It is the superior levels of life and existence. So when Sujata provides that to the Buddha, she's providing him access to the Divine Mother and the powers of the Divine Mother, the essence of the Divine Mother, which is hidden in our sexual energy. All life is made possible by a mother. All physical living things came from a mother. Spiritually too. The Divine Mother needs the forces to be at work in us in order for her to create a Buddha in us. Those forces are hidden in our sexual matter. The sexual matter, when it is transformed, when it is purified, becomes soma in Hinduism. In the Bible, it's called the oil, the water. And in the Bible, it's the first miracle of Jesus, is that transmutation. When he goes to a wedding and transforms water into wine. That is soma. Nowadays, people who study scriptures and mysticism interpret soma to be a drug. They think soma was a plant that people used to take and get high. That's because that's the level of mentality of people nowadays. They only think in things like that. They have no concept of the reality. The reality of Soma was hidden precisely because we have that mentality. Soma is not a plant. Soma is sexual energy. We are the plant. We are a tree of life, a seed that can grow if we know how to extract the juice. If you study Hinduism, if you study the Vedas, specifically in the Rig Veda, you find many prayers and scriptures and beautiful songs about Soma. And the Soma is always described as created by pressing stones. Do you know where our stones are? Anybody who's in Europe knows exactly what I'm talking about. The stones are the testicles. The stones are the ovaries. When you press the stones together, you extract the sexual energy if you're practicing alchemy or tantra. If you're not, then you waste it through the orgasm, through animal lust. But if you extract it, you acquire the power for your Divine Mother to create in you. So in the Rig Veda it says, O Soma, these 7 rivers flow as being thine to give command. The streams of milk run forth to thee. So all of that tied together. The milk that Sujata gives flows through 7 rivers. And here we see the Buddha seated on a coiled serpent with 7 serpents risen over his head. Another symbol in Buddhism that you won't find explained because it's always been hidden, protected knowledge. Those 7 serpents represent the forces of the Divine Mother. You remember in the Garden of Eden that a serpent tempts Adam and Eve. That serpent represents the power of nature, which is the Divine Mother's power. That's why Athena has as her aid and guide a serpent. You'll see statues of Athena with a serpent. And her antithesis is Medusa, who has many serpents on her head. Those are our defects, our egos. The hero has to behead Medusa, to kill the devil, and deliver the head to Athena, the Divine Mother. That is, Medusa has to be sacrificed, and from that death there is a birth. From that death of Medusa, the Divine Mother emerges greater, more beautiful, more glorious. That's why Athena wears the skin of Medusa. It sounds gross, but it's symbolic. It's symbolic of how those forces are channeled in us in order to create the soul. Here again we see the tree of life. We are here in our physical bodies. This is the very bottom of the tree of life, the Sephira Malkut. Those who work as a couple, who pass through the probationary levels of spiritual development, under the guidance of their Divine Mothers, and satisfying all the requirements kept by divinity in order to protect us, can be granted entrance into degrees of initiation. In other words, the word initiate means to begin, to be born. The couple can enter into degrees of birth, and there are 7 primary degrees of importance. That's why those 7 serpents are there above the Buddha. Each degree is a serpent because it is a burning fire that makes the sound of a serpent when it burns. That sound is an energy that's vibrating in nature. It is the force and energy of the Divine Mother. It is her very creative power. She does not grant it lightly. She does not give it on a whim. She does not give it because you paid somebody money. She does not give it because you read a book. she gives it to her children who have proven they are worthy. They are responsible. They will use it wisely and in her name, for her glory, for her work. That fire is called Kundalini. In Tibetan Buddhism, it is called Kandali. It is also called Dumo. In the West, it's called the fire of the Pentecost, which emerged out of the tops of the heads of the apostles in the book of Acts. It is also called Quetzalcoatl in the Aztec mysteries. That is a serpent of fire hidden in the book of Numbers that Moses, by the guidance of God, raised upon a staff to heal those who were suffering the bites of the fallen serpents. Numbers 21 in the Bible. 2 serpents, one fallen, one divine. 2 divine mothers, one fallen, one divine. Same force, polarized. Those who earn it can restore the divine mother to her glory, killing Medusa, elevating Athena, raising the Kundalini, first in the physical body, second the vital body, third in the astral body, fourth the mental, fifth the causal. The 6th and 7th are not fallen. The 6th and 7th belong to our innermost. They did not fall when we left Eden. So the 7 serpents above the head of the Buddha are these 7 lower Sephiroth on the tree of life. Now you notice that image of the Buddha sitting beneath the tree, the Bodhi tree, that is this, Da'at, the tree of knowledge. The Buddha sits below that tree. Here are the 7 serpents below that tree. The Buddha is our innermost. So you see, Buddhism, Kabbalah, Christianity are all the same thing, taught with different words. This is how one is born again. Jesus said that one thing is to be born of the flesh, another to be born of the spirit. Nicodemus didn't understand. He said, how does one enter into one's mother's womb again? Because he thought we were talking about a literal physical mother. And Jesus said, you're a master of Kabbalah. You're supposed to be a master of Kabbalah, and you don't know this? The mother, the womb, it's not physical. It's our divine mother. She gives birth to us spiritually, internally. That birth happens by a process, long and slow, not easy, not given freely. It is earned. It happens in very slow steps. Each initiation is a long process of being tested, purified, making great sacrifices, dying, and being born. The 3 factors in constant motion, the wheel of becoming in constant motion, but raising one's level of being, step by step. Each serpent is a set of 33 stages. They correspond to the vertebrae of our spinal column. That is the rod that Moses raised the serpent upon to heal the Israelites. That rod is your spine. That is why the life story of Jesus has 33 years. Those 33 degrees represent the stages of development, processes in which we are tested by our Divine Mother to see if we are worthy to receive her power. Each step is earned through the merits of our heart. What does the mother want from her child? The mother doesn't want her child to be a murderer, to be a liar, a thief, a fornicator. The mother wants her child to be beautiful, to be radiant, to be happy. We are not happy. We are in misery. We only want money and sex and power. The Divine Mother does not reward that. She does not reward ambition or pride or envy. She rewards humility, conscious love, happiness for others, altruism, generosity, diligence. She rewards us when we prove through our actions, physically, emotionally, mentally, that we deserve to have her blessings so that we can act with even more power for the greater good. You see, the gift of the Kundalini not only gives us a spiritual birth, but it gives her a way to work in the world. It gives her a way to help her other children. The Kundalini is her fabric, her force, her energy, her creative power. The power of the mother is to give life. She will not grant that to those who only want pain, death, destruction, who only want to take for themselves. So she does not reward idolaters, adulterers, thieves, and murderers. So when you go out and you read all the books about the awakening of Kundalini, and if you do this and you do that and you pay this amount of money and go to a workshop and have sex with a bunch of people, they're all lying. They will awaken energy in you, but the fallen aspect of the Divine Mother, the inverted energy, which we call Kunda buffer, it is the tail of Satan, the tail of a demon. You will awaken powers. You will awaken consciousness. You will develop the ability to be awake out of your body. You will develop chakras. You will have power over others, but you will be a demon awakened. You will be cursed. You will suffer. Karma cannot be avoided. If you create pain, you will experience pain. The Divine Mother, to awaken a Buddha, demands that the causes of pain and suffering are removed from us. That means it is a slow process in which we must eliminate our ego. We must die to be born. We must sacrifice ourselves psychologically, spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally, in order to be born again, anew, clean, pure, awakened. That doesn't come overnight. It doesn't come in 2 weeks. Some people say, if you come to our course, we'll awaken your Kundalini and you'll have your astral body in 6 months. They are liars. They cannot command the Divine Mother. She gives that, no one else. And she gives it in accordance with our works, not our money, not which school we go to, not which master we claim to follow. She gives it according to our earning of it. And she is very demanding, but she also loves us very much. If we achieve it, we will be born again as Buddhas, as someone who has gone beyond all coming and going, someone who is liberated from the wheel of samsara, the wheel of nirvana, the wheel of becoming. This final image shows a fully awakened Buddha in the Pure Lands. Of course, probably most Westerners would not experience the heavens to look like China. But nevertheless, it represents something significant. Through the process of these three factors, we can create something new. a new level of being. We can become Buddhas, fully awake, free from suffering. And from that place, we are then well prepared to help others do the same. But not until then. Do you have any questions?
You talked about how the sixth and the seventh serpents were not fallen. Does that mean that even someone who takes a spiral path gets those serpents?
That's right.
I was under the impression it was otherwise.
The sixth and seventh serpents belong to the being. So they relate to Buddhi and Atman, or Gabara and Chesed. And those aspects of the being never fell. That's in every creature. So that part of the being is always preserved. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
You said that there were two definitions of Maya, that there's the older one and then the newer one of illusion.
Right.
Would you say that the later one that we know is the veil of Maya, or the veil of Isis, as opposed to the true Maya?
That's right. So the newer, relatively newer interpretation of Maya relates to that veil of Isis, precisely that, as illusion. In the Egyptian tradition, it states, Isis says, no mortal has ever lifted my veil. And that veil is precisely the veil of separateness that all of us exist within. Because we are mortal, meaning that we exist in lunar bodies, not just the physical body, but the psychological body that we have. We belong to nature in that context. Divine Mother, the lunar aspect, has provided us with mortal bodies. I don't just mean physical body. I mean the lunar astral mental. That is our mortality. It is subject to the wheel of becoming. Because of that, we have this illusion that we are separate. That I am different from you, and you are different from me, and things are different from me. That is an illusion. It is not real. Someone who awakens, that's one of the first things they begin to understand. And that's what's represented in the tree of life. The higher levels, that illusion ceases to be present. And you see the reality, that everything is interrelated and interpenetrating, interdependent. That's what the outer ring of the wheel represents, is that interdependence. The veil of Isis is torn when one develops the soul and one is no longer mortal. And at those levels, one is no longer subject to that veil, the Maya. One then sees the truth, the reality. The reality is the absolute. So that's why we used the term in the previous lecture, prajna. Prajna is that penetrating wisdom, that discriminating wisdom that sees through the veil, tears it, and sees the reality. That veil is the body, the matrix, or the fabric of nature, which is Maya, the Divine Mother. When you pierce that, you see the Divine Mother herself, reality, that interdependence of all things, and the absolute that sustains it. That is awakening. Intellectually, it doesn't make a lot of sense. It's a conscious thing. It's a cognizant experience that shows that the way we perceive is a dream. It isn't real. But you can only know that when you've woken up. So one has to strive continually to change how one perceives and to meditate and meditate and meditate and meditate so the consciousness becomes strengthened and stronger and stronger and stronger until it has the capability to perceive without hesitation and without pause. It's the ability to sustain presence, to be continually here and now in constant observation without distraction that gives you the ability to start to penetrate that. But it's only with the development of the soul, the serpents of the Kundalini, that power is fully focused. What that means is that the singles, the ones who don't develop the soul, can develop that power to a certain degree. They can develop insight into nature and how it functions. But the only way to fully break it and to fully break the wheel of becoming in oneself and become fully liberated is to develop the soul, to create those raise the seven serpents, create the solar bodies, and get off the wheel. It's a long process. So when you study the philosophy of these traditions that analyze emptiness and the nature of emptiness, you'll see a great difference. And you can see that part of that is the level of instruction and training that the writer of the scripture had, or the teacher of the scripture had. So I kind of went off topic, but...
Talking about that, how do we penetrate like the fifth dimension? We always say the ego is the fifth dimension, right? And we can't penetrate it with our three-dimensional mind, right? So to work on the ego, right, as a single, how do we penetrate these different dimensions?
That's a good question. The question is, how do we see the roots of the ego which reside in the fifth dimension? How do we penetrate that? How do we access that? First of all, we have to understand that everything is multidimensional. What we're experiencing here and now, we call it the third dimension, physicality. But what we're experiencing here and now is the collection of all of these other dimensions into this space. Or this space is not the right term, but this moment. So even though we can't directly see the fifth dimension here, we can infer it. What we talk about as the fifth dimension is eternity. It's an existence that's beyond this third level, third dimension. It's a level in which time functions in a different way. It has matter, it has energy, and we experience it when we're dreaming. So physically, we sometimes perceive and experience dreaming when we daydream. Probably everybody in this lecture daydreamed. I'm not going to point at anybody, but I did see some people spaced out. And when you're spaced out, you're daydreaming. You're not here and now. So you were tasting the fifth dimension. You were inferring its existence. You may not call it that. You call it a daydream. You were dreaming about what you're going to eat as soon as I stop talking. Whatever it is you have in mind to eat or drink or go to the bathroom, you were seeing those images and projecting those images. Yeah, those images are reflected into the brain, but where they emerge from is the fifth dimension. And when you dream at night, you go there. Your consciousness goes there. So from the third dimensional point of view, that's part of why we learn to meditate. To suspend the physical senses, to shut them off. To close all the physical senses and to look within. Awake. Conscious, not dreaming. Awake. But to open up our inner eye. The same way you daydream, the same way you think about that beautiful lunch you're going to have, you do that with meditation, but not about lunch. Then you're analyzing whatever ego it is that is bothering you or that you need to work on. So if you experience something related with envy, you would then visualize what happened with precision. What did you see, hear, say? What happened? What were the circumstances? What was that environment? You remember it. You project the image. You visualize it. That's the beginning of that meditation. That is your access to the fifth dimension right there. And as you develop that skill, it no longer is a matter of you projecting the memory, projecting what happens. You then just relax, close your eyes, shut your senses down, concentrate, meditate, and all of a sudden, those images come spontaneously. The same way it happens when you fall asleep at night. Your dreams just come. Meditation will be like that once you learn to meditate properly. The images just come, and you just sit and observe and learn. That's how you access the fifth dimension. It's in that place that you can enter into the deepest roots of the ego and eliminate a lot of problems. Now, going deeper, there are aspects related to the ego, hidden deep in the psyche, that for you to fully work on them as a single person, you will not have the ability to transform enough energy to eliminate them. And these are deep, crystallized, hardened condensations in the mind. To destroy those things, you need a solar body, not the lunar body that we have now, psychological body, but a solar one that can transform and direct much more energy. That's another reason why we need to raise the Kundalini and create the soul. It's because to get at the roots of the ego, to fully eliminate the ego, we need that level of work. Question back here?
Yeah, there's a few. At what point is the second birth?
At what point is the second birth? The second birth is a process. It is not one thing. We can state that as soon as you begin transmutation, that is, as soon as you renounce the orgasm, you begin to transform your sexual energy, whether you're single or in a couple. You begin the process of the second birth, that instant. Because you begin to conserve and protect the most sacred energy you have access to, and no longer corrupt it with your desire. That initiates the process. If you don't do that, there will be no birth. So you can say that the beginning of transmutation is the beginning of your birth. Birth itself is a series of initiations. Remember, initiation means to begin, to initiate. So it is a long process. I talked about 7 fundamental initiations, but there are more. True spiritual birth, the real spiritual birth, is something else. Something I didn't address yet today. We ran out of time. Let me just make one more statement about that. The real spiritual birth, when we create the solar bodies, when the Kundalini is being awakened in us, that is a birth, but it's only setting the stage for the real birth. The real birth is when Christ is born in us. And that is only possible for those who enter into the path of the Bodhisattva, the direct path. That happens only at the completion of the initiation of Tiferet, the 5th initiation of major mysteries. And even that birth is a beginning. Because that birth is the beginning of the full development of the Bodhisattva. So the Bodhisattva, when it is fully developed, is at the end of the second mountain, related with the Nirmanakaya, the Sephira Binah, with resurrection. With resurrection, we die. We sacrifice everything, including our body, and we die. And we're born as a resurrected master. That is a complete spiritual birth. So it gets in stages. More questions?
How can we increase our will for spiritual birth?
How do we increase our will for spiritual birth? Study karma. Relentlessly. Study cause and effect in yourself and in other people, in the world. Study suffering. Every day. Study how much people suffer and why. Not blaming others, not blaming the governments and the corporations or the religions, but look at how each individual person and city and state and country and continent create their own suffering because of their own idiosyncrasies. Study that in relation with yourself and see how you are doing it too. Firstly, to understand how this law functions. Secondly, so that we stop blaming everyone else. Thirdly, so we see that the responsibility lies within. From that, spontaneously, will emerge enormous will to awaken, to stop creating suffering, and also to help others. And the only way to achieve that help is to be born spiritually. More?
Is there a prayer you can offer that we can say to help us call upon our Divine Mother to assist when we face life's challenges? Also, how often should we transmute sexually for our practice to bear fruit?
Is there a prayer or something we can use to call upon our Divine Mother to help us? Yeah. Say, Mother, please help me. As a child, you don't need to learn certain words to call for your mother's help. You simply call your mom. Mom! Same thing spiritually. Your mother is never separate from you. Everything that you are, she is in that. She is in you, with you, of you, and you of her. Always. Meditate on her. Talk to her. Call upon her. And those who don't believe in her, who don't believe in this, open your mind. Cast out that foolish notion that the Divine Mother is a physical-bodied person. She is not. She is the intelligence that gave rise to everything that exists. She is far beyond our puny concepts. And she is the embodiment of all of the compassion and love in the universe. She is love of a level that we can scarcely understand. She is pure love. Call upon her. If your mind is so focused or so in need, there's also a mantra you can use. It's a very famous mantra. It's the second most famous mantra in Tibetan Buddhism, and I will say it so that you can learn it and study it and use it. It's very powerful. It is Om Tare Tu Tare Tare Soha. I'm sure everybody wrote that down. Om Tare Tu Tare Tare Soha. That is the mantra of Tara, the Divine Mother. It is extremely powerful. It calls her immediately. But she doesn't need that. You need that. She's the Divine Mother. She doesn't need mantras. She knows everything that's going on with you in every moment for all eternity. The instant you feel the longing for her, she's there. She doesn't need you to call her. She's not waiting in the other room saying, well, you never call me anymore. She's not like your physical mom who's trying to make you feel guilty for not calling. She's your real mother, your Divine Mother. She's always aware of you, even when you forget her. The second question was about how often we should transmute. How often should we transmute our energy for our practice to bear fruit? Transmutation is a highly individual effort. Each of us has our own idiosyncrasy in how the energy flows through us, determined by our karma, by our age, by our health. Truthfully, we should be in a constant process of transmutation. If you're really observing yourself, remembering yourself, you should be constantly transmuting energy. This is the basis of the transformation of impressions. That is a transmutation. The word transmutation means to change thoroughly. So everything you see, hear, think, feel should be a transmutation of something impure into something pure. So you can transmute all day long simply by maintaining the right bhava, state of mind. So transmutation does not strictly depend on particular exercises. It depends on a state of being. That said, there are exercises that are more focused for transmutation. For singles, we have exercises like runes and pranayama. For couples, we have sahaja maituna, sexual magic. Couples should only practice at most once per day. Most couples probably won't do that much. We have what's called a creative magnetic pause. This is a natural cycle of how the energy rises and falls, like the waves in the ocean. And every couple will have their own rhythm, according to their temperature, sexually speaking. Couples who run hot will have the sexual act more often. Could be once a day, at the most. Couples who are warm will be less often. Could be once a week. Couples who are cool will be even less often, once every 2 weeks, once a month. It depends. But it should be natural, not forced. It should be spontaneous, dictated by the heart, by love, by a true emotional, spiritual, mental, and willful intimacy. Not because we've been told we have to practice every day. If you do that, you will kill your marriage. And I can guarantee that because I have witnessed it. I have observed instructors and students in relationships who assumed upon themselves that demand to practice sexual magic every day. They ended in divorce because they were breaking their own creative magnetic pause. They were going against their spontaneous, natural energies. Don't do that. Respect yourself, respect your spouse, respect your divine mother. Learn to work in harmony with nature. Another question?
What does active imagination have to do with sexual energy? Moreover, isn't it a door into the psyche?
What does active imagination have to do with sexual energy, and is it a door into the psyche? Absolutely yes. The imagination is the ability to see. We use our imagination when we daydream. When someone tells you, I need you to go do this and that. So for example, the husband. The wife says, go to the store and get me this thing and this thing and this thing. The husband has to see in his mind the pictures of each element he has to go get. Otherwise, he won't remember. That's imagination. Simple. In meditation, we do the same thing. We actively imagine what we need to see. If we have abused our sexual energy, depleted our sexual energy, our imagination will be very weak. Sexual energy is the very fundamental energy that feeds our imaginative ability. Imagination is the power of the pineal gland to project imagery. The pineal gland is in charge of the sexual organs. The pineal gland regulates the flow of the endocrine system. The pineal gland controls and is nourished by the sexual forces. When we have depleted our sexual energy, the pineal gland atrophies. It weakens. We can no longer see. This is partly why the beginners in religion had to learn chastity to retain the sexual energy so that the pineal gland became very strong so they could see in meditation, so they could awaken and develop the power to see into the astral world. It's part of the reason. So your imagination is directly connected to your sexual forces. Those who restrain the sexual energy and transform it have very powerful imagination. And that's why we see amongst the greatest artists in history, they knew how to transmute their sexual energy. Wagner, Beethoven, Mozart, Da Vinci, all of those great artists transmuted their sexual energy. They didn't waste it. Thoreau is another one. Bach. They all knew this. Not all of them were perfect initiates, but they knew something of it. Same for us. If we want a good, strong imagination, transmute your energy. Any other question?
What is the relationship between samsara and nature? Is there a hierarchy?
The relationship between samsara and nature. Well, in the previous lectures, we explained what samsara is. Samsara means circling. Samsara is a psychological state, not a place. It is a level of being. We are in samsara because of our level of being. We are in nature also because of our level of being. But we don't have to be in samsara. That's a choice. If we change our level of being, if we change our perception and our behavior, we can get out of samsara. We can cut through the circling, which means to achieve nirvana. Nirvana means cessation, ending. So the relationship between samsara and nirvana, we put samsara in motion through our attitude.
The presentation of this lecture was made possible by donations from listeners like you. Will you help others to benefit from this knowledge? Most Gnostic schools recommend a donation of $10 to $20 per lecture. Every single donation helps. Make a donation now at gnosticradio.org. For questions and deeper understanding of this lecture, we invite you to explore the books published by Glorian Publishing and available from booksellers worldwide. Visit gnosticbooks.org to learn more. Thank you. May all beings be happy.